Ari Lewis Show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the program, arilewishow@hotmail.com, or you can email the station, Israel Sports and News Radio @gmail.com. January 7th marks the second annual Festivus Comedy Festival at the AACI. A lot of great comedians will be performing, many of them Anglos. And on the line right now, one of those great comedians who's also an Anglo from Canada, but a Dolphins fan for some reason. We'll get into that. A well-known comedian throughout Israel and the host of Hard Candy back in Canada television show. We'll talk about that as well. Kandi Abelson. Kandi, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Henry. It's great to be here.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk, first of all, we're going to interview Hani Skutch in the second segment. I plan to ask her how she got into comedy, and I'll start that with you as well. How was it that you got into this crazy field, crazy level of work we call comedy?
Well, I owned a business in Europe, believe it or not, and I lost my business, and I had 600 employees, and I felt way worse for them than I did for me. And I said, you know what, next time someone takes my job, they can kill me. Everyone says I'm funny. I want a job that's integral to me. And I don't want to be responsible for 600 more, other people.
Right.
And that's it. I mean, I came back to Canada and moved home with like $35,000 in debt, took 3 jobs, and moved out when I had paid it off. And by that time, I was already working in comedy.
And eventually, I mean, you did so well that you were on a television series called Hard Candy. Tell us a bit about how you got into that, what the show was about.
Okay, well, it was actually a special. It was a comedy special in Canada. It wasn't a series.
Okay, gotcha.
And I got that actually by doing a bit part in another show. Like a friend of mine asked me to play a hooker in his special. And the producer and originator called me and said, oh, my God, that was the funniest thing I've seen since the whole time I'm in the editing room. You want your half hour? And I was like, yeah, of course.
So that's what led to that special. And then how did people react to that? Because that obviously gave you a lot of national prominence. I mean, you were known before, but that kind of took you to another level, correct?
Yeah, it's such a process, and it's been so many years, and it's like all the steps. There's no one step that catapults anywhere, because I actually still haven't gotten anywhere. Look what I'm doing. But that was one great thing. I mean, I moved to the U.S. I moved to Hollywood to go to American Film Institute. And also because I didn't want to make it twice. I saw my friends who were way on top of the hill move to the United States and have to start at the bottom again. And when I started working Las Vegas, which I got off a French show in Montreal, I just realized that's when I really felt like I was catapulted. 4 times a year in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand for 2 weeks at a time, 2 shows a night, 7 days. Wow, that's when you feel like, oh, yes, I'm in show business now.
And a lot of people, when they feel like they hit a certain level, they have some way they celebrate. Any particular celebrations you engaged in?
I celebrate every day from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. I am the most easily happily person. Most comics are depressed, but it's not the case with me. And so I don't know that I have particular celebrations, but if you look at my life, you go, wow, she's always celebrating.
Again,
after we do this, I'm going whiskey tasting, and then I have a late show in Hebrew. So
nice.
This is my celebration for today.
Okay, awesome. And again, we're speaking with Kandi Abelson here on the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. Talking about the January 7th performance at AACI, the second annual Jerusalem Festivus Comedy Festival. What's interesting is, for those who have not seen your work, you can be a little dirty. I don't know if anyone ever told you that, but you have
never.
Just a little bit. But what's interesting is, and I'm saying this most flattering way, you have a very an innocent look about you. You wouldn't feel like, oh, that woman's going to say really disgusting things. So is there an extra shock value that goes to your advantage when you make dirty jokes?
I guess there might be. Definitely I get up there and I look like a school teacher, and then, well, would you want me in front of the class, really? What kind of a class would that be? So I do think it works in an advantage. But the truth is, I said, I've been swearing my whole life, and when I was a kid, my mom used to wash my mouth out with soap. I guess it worked because now I really like soap. It's just a lifelong thing, and on stage you want to be honest. So when I work certain places and I have to hold back, I can, but it's never easy. Life is dirty.
Yes, that's for sure. A good family friend of mine, Otto Peterson, may rest in peace, really great comedian, very, very dirty. He was told time and time again by agents, other people, if you could be clean, we can put you more on television, or put you more in mainstream things. Have you ever considered, obviously you could do that if you need to, but have you ever thought, let me change my act completely to go to a different level, or would you not consider that at all?
Never. I refused Leno because I didn't want to clean up. I said, my F's are art. Now today it's funny because living in Israel, I do clean it up all the time for much less than Leno. Today in my life, I would look at it differently, but I can work clean for an hour. I don't have to be dirty, but it's just the full expression. I don't know what language. I mean, there's a lot of things that I consider dirty. There's a lot of jokes that I won't tell or won't talk about, that I think are just really divisive and bad. But I think, sex, what's wrong with that?
Well, you bring a very interesting point, because there's a certain comedy place that we both know about that does not allow swearing, but allows really racist jokes, allows jokes about death of babies, things I think personally are much worse than swearing. So kind of give us your thoughts about that. Is there kind of a double...
Right, like scatological humor,
right.
I do none of that. To me, that's way dirtier. Okay, don't take me to the bathroom with you for 10 minutes. I don't want to be in the bathroom for longer than you are.
Right.
That to me is not funny, and most women don't find it funny. Men find it hilarious, so there's no way around it.
That's for sure. Yeah, me and my friends
you make
consider
your choices, and my choice is always, my contract with the audience is to make them laugh where they're at.
Basically, so you want to, I don't want to say tailor's the right word, but you kind of analyze the audience and do jokes that will make them laugh, but you don't want to compromise where you're coming from, your expression. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, the few times if I dislike an audience enough, then I could actually do all the jokes that I think they'd hate. But that's only happened one or two times in my entire career, thank God. I like to get there and watch other people and see, and then, I write what I call fishing jokes. So I do a few different fishing jokes, and then I find out what kind of jokes they like. And because I have such a big repertoire, I can do that. And I always like to improvise in every show as well. So it's more fun to not know where you're going than to know. And the audience senses it even if they don't know.
Right, and that's a big aspect of comedy is live, right there in the moment, and it's not the same as like doing a TV show where you can do it over and over, different takes. You kind of got that one shot. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show. This is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio, joined by Kandi Abelson. Kandi, do you ever concern because the fact you do push the edge, you push the line, or a lot of people say you cross it, you ever concerned that you would upset audience members? Is that ever a factor when you're on stage?
No. You have to make that choice early. People get upset at everything. This is the most politically correct world. If I was concerned with that, I'd have to find another job for sure. I'm more concerned with finding people and opening their minds. Wanting kids, like when I have teenagers, I want them to know that it's okay to talk about things. It's okay to wonder about stuff. It's okay to address all kinds of topics. That's what when a kid puts on Facebook something that I've said, that's great. When I can speak to an 18-year-old and they tell me, wow, that was a key, that's great. It's not anything I can repeat here on the radio. By the way, you'll have to come and see me live and not at that show.
Right. Also, I'm curious, I talk to comedians and ask them, who were their inspirations. And, for some reason while talking to you, Jay Leno keeps coming to my mind because you talk about him, performing in Israel. He is one of the dirtiest stand-ups that you'll ever see, but obviously cleaned up for the Tonight Show. Was he ever an influence on you? And if not,
actually, Jay Leno was one of my idols, and Because he's one of my idols, not for the same reason that maybe other people love him, but before he got the Tonight Show and even after, he was on the road every single day, everywhere. And you'd see him in New Year's Eve. Everybody wants to be in Vegas. He'd be in North Dakota. I mean, when he sat at the Tonight Show desk, he knew what every single person in all of America was thinking because he'd been there and played there. And I modeled myself very, very much after him in terms of that experience. I was on the road 50 weeks a year in my car going I flew to Alaska, but everywhere else I drove. And anything less than 24 hours was a day's trip. And he's on my idol in terms of joke writing. It's more like Sam Kinison, a Canadian. You might not have heard of Mike McDonald.
Sure.
These are the guys that I'd admire. But Jay Leno, with his work ethic, was just astounding. And that's what I tried to go for.
Really, I think no one touches Jay's work ethic, and it's interesting because a lot of people say artistically Letterman was better, but if you go by ratings, Leno, it wasn't close. Leno got $6 million a night. Letterman got about 3.3. Really, no one touches Jay's work ethic in the comedic world, right?
Right. No, exactly. And the thing is, and if you've been to every single state and you've played in the big cities and the small towns, when you're sitting at a big desk, you're talking to everyone. You know, you may be looking at the guy next to you when you're wondering how's it playing everywhere. And Letterman, well, he's never been outside New York, so he's great, but he's inside, so you're never going to get the ratings. He'll be more of a comics comic.
Right, that's what it seemed to be. There were a lot of guests that he would particularly have that Leno wouldn't get, but again, Leno always crushed in the ratings and was number one for about 22 years approximately. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. Speak with Kandi Abelson. We're talking about the second Jerusalem Festivus Comedy Festival, which is going to be January 7th, the AACI. Kandi, I want to know that during the show, obviously you've done comedy for a long time. Anything can happen. It's live. When you get heckled, do you have a go-to place, or do you kind of just play off the cuff? What do you do when that happens?
Right. I just address it. I'm not a person who gets heckled a lot because I talk fast, and I'm considered an intelligent comic, so they can't even figure out where to heckle me. Also, Israeli crowds really don't heckle, so it's not, rarely. They talk to you nonstop, but that's different. They answer every rhetorical question. They give you advice in the middle. I mean, they don't stop, particularly in English, it seems like. But it's really, I got heckled. You just get heckled and you go wherever. I got heckled by a good friend at the Comedy Store. It was really funny. I was coming up to the top of my line, and she yelled, "Oh, they're throwing me out. I won't have another drink." And I just started laughing. And I couldn't believe it. And then I said, "Oh, my goodness, I'm being heckled by my best friend." And that's really weird because she's complaining that she can't have another drink, and she's an alcoholic. So somebody bought her a drink, and I finished my show. But the first time I got heckled, I didn't even say anything. I was like, geez, what an idiot. Why would he interrupt the show? And then everyone said, "Oh, it shows weakness in you." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I just thought he looked like an idiot anyway. What could I possibly say to enlighten him more?" But the worst hecklers are women, and I just like to let it fly the way it goes. And one time I made the whole audience with me watch someone crawl out on all fours. And we pointed. I said, "Okay, let's point at her." I don't think she ever heckled anyone again.
Wow, that's pretty nasty. So you kind of took her to school, basically.
Yeah, I did, because you have to show the audience at that point who's boss. And I used to be punished for my big mouth in school. I've been practicing a long time. When I married my husband, he was so excited that he was finally close to somebody who could do the answers to people that he wanted, It's great living in Israel. You get to use your big mouth a lot.
Right. You have a lot of opportunities to answer hecklers just on the street, the bus, supermarket.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of experience there. Again, speaking of Israel, obviously you made your mark in Canada. What pushed you to make Aliyah? Was it Zionist belief, family? Tell us about the move to the Holy Land.
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, I was at a stage where I should be donating a lot of money to Israel, but being a comic, I didn't have any money. So I thought, well, I'll just move here and then the government take what little I have from me slowly. And that's working out pretty good.
Yeah, they do a good
the
job
other
of that.
thing is that I got married, and my husband, who is British, doesn't like America and doesn't like Americans. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but the vibe. And I was like, I'm not really prepared to live with an unhappy man. So let's pick a place that's going to make you happy, and as long as it's not somewhere cold and miserable like England, I'm in. So he picked Israel, which surprised me because he hadn't been here since he was 21 and he doesn't speak the language. But he did come with a simultaneous translator, so that was okay.
Yeah,
My
so,
was good.
And this is something I ask a lot of comedians that grew up outside of Israel, they move here. I mean, did you actually think at some point you would do comedy, especially in English, in Israel?
Yeah, I always knew I would do comedy in Israel. I did comedy here when I visited. Actually, my first winter in comedy, I came here because I was living in Canada, and I thought, I'm going to starve. At least let me be able to live at the beach rather than like outside in an igloo. So I came here. I worked on a movie, and the head of the movie, the star, he was a stand-up comic, and he said, "Oh, come and work with me at Bait Lessing." I said, "But it'll be in English." He said, "That's okay. They understand English." So I've always done a little comedy here, and I just love how vibrant the scene is now that you can do a lot of comedy. I'm doing a lot in Hebrew and a lot in English and a little in French. So.
Wow. So what are the French audiences like?
They're good, actually. French audiences are good. They're enthusiastic. They like to have a good time, and they're happy as long as they don't have to spend too much money.
Now, you're talking about the scene. Tel Aviv in particular seems to be kind of more poppin', more things going on. You feel like that's more recently, or that's been a while? Like, tell us a bit about the scene and its growth.
It's just growing. Like last night, there were 3 English shows, 2 in Tel Aviv and 1 in Ra'anana, which is amazing because, 2 years ago, there was 1 night every week. And there's just more comics. A few have moved here. Some have gotten better. Everyone has their own night. There's a place called Comedy Man, Tuesday and Wednesday, and they're in South Tel Aviv. And they're really developing not just a group of comics, but also audience and educating them in English and Hebrew, and inviting us to do crossover and just creating such a good vibe. And then the Dancing Camel is doing it every Wednesday, and then the Camel Comedy Club, I did a show there last night in English, and I got the headline at a place that I do 3 shows a week in Hebrew. So that was amazing. I got to do 30 minutes in English there, and that was like a dream come true. I've been working there over a year. Nobody has ever seen me tell a joke in English till last night. So that was fun.
And last question for you. You speak of the different nuances with the languages. Is there a way that you have a solid joke in English, you translate it to Ivrit? Tell us about that process.
Well, now I'm doing it myself, so there's a bit of a learning curve. But, sometimes you hit it right, and sometimes it takes me a long time. Like, for instance, I have a joke that if an audience is a tough audience, I say, listen, you should let out your laughter, because if you try and swallow it, it goes down to your hips and spreads. So that works in English. When you translate it to Hebrew, it didn't work. And then finally, the other day on stage, I was like, tachat, that's the funny word in Hebrew. So I say, well, then it just goes in your stomach, and then it goes right to your tachat. And then, boom, of course. That was like the key to the joke. Nobody cares about hips in Hebrew. They only want, So that's harder for me to find out what are the funny words. Or I'll translate something correctly, but that's not necessarily funny enough. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty interesting process. I'm always fascinated with languages and how certain things will be funny, and you directly translate it, it's not. And like you said, you got to find the funny word in that case. Again, we're speaking with Kandi Abelson on the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. Kandi will be performing at the AACI on January 7th. That is the second annual Jerusalem Festivus Comedy Festival. I will be performing along with a lot of other great comedians, so everyone could check that out. We'll have a link to the site on a Times News article, so check that as well. Kandi, we know you got to run. Thanks for the time this evening. We appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, but Harry, we have to get back together and talk specifically about sports and comedy. Stories another time, okay?
All right.
Right, another time. You take care. Thanks for calling.
Welcome to the Ari Lewis Show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the program arilewishow@hotmail.com, or you can email the station Israel Sports and News Radio at gmail.com. January 7th of 2016 marks the second annual Festivus Comedy Festival featuring several comedians of Anglo persuasion in Israel. They'll be performing at the AACI in Jerusalem. Online is one of those comedians. She is well known in Israel, both in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Rehovot, all over. And it's great to catch up with her. I haven't spoken to her in a few years. So back to the program is Hani Skutch. Hani, how you doing out there?
I'm great, Ari. Thanks a lot.
Yes, it's great to have you on. So I'm curious, kind of a basic question, but I think a lot of fans want to know, how is it that you got into comedy in the first place?
Well, can I say this without sounding too conceited, that I kind of always felt that I was funny. I was certainly funny looking, but I felt that I was funny haha also. And at some point in my life, I found that I was kind of nervous to stand up and speak in public. When I saw that there was a comedy course taking place in Jerusalem with David Kolumnik, I thought, well, let me try. Maybe this will kind of give me an entree into getting in front of people. And I took the course, and that was history.
You bring up public speaking. Jerry Seinfeld has that great routine that they take a survey, and more people are scared of public speaking than death. And then Seinfeld says, so at a funeral, most people would rather be in the box than giving the eulogy. I want to know how you felt about public speaking once you started to do it, if you got more comfortable as time went on.
Well, I definitely did, but it was very slow, very, very slow. And in fact, I found another outlet or another way to improve with a group called Toastmasters. It's an international group, and without, my intention wasn't to give them a plug, but 2 years ago I started going to this group and having the opportunity to speak in public, which most people don't do, maybe in work a little bit, but not so much. And this group, they give you assignments and you have to speak. And 2 years on, I'm much more comfortable. I guess I'd rather stay alive, give a speech and stay alive would be my choice now.
Yeah, for sure. People have different ideas when it comes to comedy of what type of comedy they'll perform. If they perform personal comedy, observation comedy, or different types, what's your particular style? What do you like to do when you go on stage?
Oh, well, I like to make people laugh. That's obvious. But I guess it's me. It's my life. And so it's quirky, it's serious, even sometimes if you can have serious comedy. I talk about my kids and my husband, and they put up with it because I still do the laundry. So for now, it works.
Nice.
But that's who I am. I don't follow the news, or there are people who only want to do the news and only want to talk about current events. My current events are, did I separate the blacks from the whites? So I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about laundry. But,
yes. Tell us about some wacky times in comedy, like let's say if you were heckled really strangely, or you started to go on stage and maybe forgot your jokes and had to improvise on the spot. Tell us about some wacky times on stage.
Well, it's interesting because, it's sort of like a live animal. Because you're up there and you're not just you. Maybe if you were a musician, you would be playing your piece, and if you mess up, probably most people don't even know you've messed up, and you continue, or you cut it short, or you do whatever you do. With comedy, it is very direct. You say something, and you get a response. It's not always a laugh. Sometimes it's a groan, or maybe even, applause, which is wonderful. But my very first time doing comedy on stage, I had brought some of my good friends, so they were with me to support me, and I did not know all my jokes cold. In fact, it's one of the things I kind of struggle with a little bit. So I wrote my jokes on my hand, but because I was sweating so profusely, when I looked at my hand, everything was gone. So that was a little awkward, but luckily my friends loved me and I was having fun, which, I think really that's the trick. If you're having fun, people will have fun with you. If you laugh and say, "Oh my God, what happened to my notes on my hand?" Everybody's human, and comedy is really showing a very human side of yourself. And I think people, if they get you, they appreciate it. If they don't get you, they think you're weird, and that's that.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. We're talking about the Festivus Comedy Festival on January 7th, joined by one of the comedians here on the program, Hani Skutch. Hani, Conan O'Brien once said that if a person wants to get on television, there's much easier ways than to do stand-up comedy. He insists that stand-up comedy is the hardest job in entertainment, in show business. I want to get your thoughts because at the end of the day, it's you and a microphone, and that's about it. So would you agree with Conan O'Brien's assessment?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, I would, except that if I was singing and I forgot the words, let's say, I could hum, I guess, but I would then have to take it to a different place, too. So I don't know if it's the very hardest, but it's certainly, right up there. It's pretty hard.
All right, so tell us about a time where, let's say, you told these jokes didn't work. Let's say, in comedy world, it's called bombing. After those type of things happen, do you look back and go, I know how to fix it this time, or do you say it was a particular audience, or what's the way you kind of go about it? Because there are a lot of great comedians that bomb. I mean, every comedian bombs at some point. It happens. So Jamie Kandi would just kind of talk about how he would learn from each experience. I want to know kind of your thoughts of how you handle those type of things moving forward.
Okay. In truth, I don't think I do it as well as I should, meaning there are lots of comedians who tape themselves at every show, who then go back and listen or watch and, as you said, kind of try to analyze where they could have made, a better decision or connected better to the audience. I have, I'm overweight. I don't like really looking at myself. So I don't tape myself as often as I should, and so without having that, I try to understand it as a kind of a gestalt. It's not just the audience, but it is a relationship. So was it something I did? Was it the feeling in the room when I got up there? Is it lack of experience? I do try to understand it, but I think sort of one of my goals in the next year is to approach it more scientifically or analytically. But as you said, some of the best comedians, even when they've been doing it for years, they have, an off night, an off week, or whatever.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I appreciate Larry David doing a special where he kind of did behind the scenes where he did some stand-up comedy. And this is a guy who wrote for Seinfeld, won Emmys, made millions of dollars. And there was an episode he bombed, and he had a great joke about it. He's like, okay, well, that's about it. I'm going to end the set now. There's no point in me going on. He made some good jokes out of the situation. There's obviously now a lot of female comedians. Maybe not more than the men, but there's a good amount. I want to know if there are any female comedians that you've looked up to in the past or currently look up to. A lot of great Jewish female comedians, both past and present. You obviously have Joan Rivers, may she rest in peace. You have Sarah Silverman now, a little more dirtier than your personal routine, Hani, but she is pretty successful. So who are some comedians you look up to? Both female and male, but more specifically female.
Okay. There's a comedian who I adore. She's British, so your American listeners may not know her. Her name is Jo Brand, and she's also bigger than average and about my age. So I think that those are two things that I really like about her. Not that most comedians are thin. That I don't think that's a direct line there. But she, I just really admire her, and she is very dirty. I think a lot of comedians are. I play with that a little bit. I like to perform clean, but sometimes there's something that just I want to say, and it's right on the line, or even maybe a little bit over my line. So I wouldn't say you'd never catch me using language that's not appropriate for a third grader. You might, but Jo Brand I think is wonderful. I think Roseanne is incredible. very raw, very real. I admire her for that. In terms of men, there's a guy named Michael Maloney. I think that's his last name. I'm not positive at the moment. So he's awesome. He's young. He's American. He tells stories. I tell more kind of one-liners, but he tells stories. He's incredible. And there's just lots and lots of good people out there. You know, people who the two people I've mentioned, many people know of, but there are lots of comedians out there who no one's heard of, who are awesome.
Yeah, dude. I mean, there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of different types, a lot of varieties, so people can kind of get their fill. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports and News Radio. We're talking about the January 7th AACI Festivus Comedy Festival, joined by Hani Skutch. She'll be performing in that event. You know, that particular event is partly a comedy to benefit One Family Fun, and I'm curious about some places you performed in the past. Tell us about some of those places, if they were for to benefit a charity or a general show, or people that like to have comedians come to their businesses and corporations. So tell us about some of the places you performed in the past.
Okay. I performed, actually, I do have a day job, which is a very good thing, and I have performed a few times at work, which is really, you know, my children say, Mom, don't do it. You're crazy. You know, don't do it. But I love where I work, and I feel in some way that I can give back. I mean, you know, again, I'm not Seinfeld, but I can share my view on the world with them, and I like doing that. I have performed for charitable organizations. My name, I don't think, draws anybody, but I enjoy doing it in Rehovot. I've done it in Jerusalem, and in the States a little bit as well. I actually performed at the summer camp where I was a camper for many years, a camper and a counselor. And that was really incredible. We were sitting right next to a lake in Maine in the pine trees around a campfire in a circle. And I was trying to read my notes a little bit with a flashlight like you do with camp. And that was amazing to perform in front of little kids all the way up to grandmother age, 300 women who I connected with in some way. So that was pretty cool.
You know, talking about performing in front of young people and older people, I'm curious, have you ever performed in front of your family?
Oh, yes, I do. A lot of my material, my early material especially, was about my mother. My mother and I loved each other very much. My mother died a year ago. We loved each other very much, but you know, we had our differences, and so a lot of my jokes were about her. And I performed in front of her. She was always very supportive and very accepting that they were about her, not nice about her. You know, I kind of lowered myself to the age of a teenager as I wrote those, so I sounded and spoke like a teenager as her mother, not as a grown woman with her, you know, elderly mother. But my mother died a year ago, and I eulogized her at her funeral and told some of the jokes and told sort of my story. And I had a lot of laughs there. Kind of felt a little guilty, actually, that, you know, my mother's funeral, we're all laughing. But I think my mother would have really appreciated it and enjoyed that while we were loving her, we were sharing some of the funny stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it's worth, there's a very interesting eulogy given by Billy Crystal when a friend of his died, where he just kind of cracked jokes, and I guess that he felt that's what his friend would have wanted. Obviously, most people don't want that, but you know, everyone has their own style regarding that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm curious, you've lived in Israel for a while. When you first got to Israel, did you ever imagine that not only you would do comedy in front of people, but that you would do it in English and there would be enough of a market for that? Did you think that would happen?
No, never. And I consider myself really fortunate that I have, kind of just fell into this, all of it, you know, doing comedy itself and having an audience. And you know, I'm religious, and I really believe a lot of it's God. When I say something improvisational on stage, that it just comes to me, that's not rehearsed, it's God. It's not me. It's from God, and I am super glad that he doesn't mind performing with me, because I do much better with him than I would if I were just running solo.
Yeah, things are easier with God, that's for sure. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Hani Skutch. We're talking about the Jerusalem Festivus Comedy Festival, which will take place January 7th at the AACI. By the way, my producer just handed me something. I forgot to mention Dick Schatt was the gentleman that died, and then Billy Crystal's the one who gave the eulogy, and he told jokes about him. Anyways, that's what happened. So thanks to the producer on that. So going forward, you were talking about some of your goals for this year. You want to be a little more scientific. Any other specific goals? Like you'd like to perform in front of X, you'd like to perform at Y, you want to tell different types of jokes. Tell us more about your goals outside of being more scientific.
Okay. Wow, Ari, you ask amazing questions. Really, you do. I think that, as I mentioned, Michael Mullaney is his name. He tells stories, and I'm a big storyteller too. But I'm always after the next laugh, and sometimes in a story you have to wait a little bit longer for a laugh. So I think one of my goals is pausing and waiting for the laugh, telling a little bit more of a story. That's I sometimes I talk too fast. People say slow, slow, slow. So that's another thing that I'm always trying to be conscious of. But truthfully, I'm up on stage, I'm energized, I'm having fun, and I talk quickly. So I guess let's just say, Ari, that there's lots I can work on.
Well, everyone obviously can always improve their game, and that's why I like comedy, because it's not a perfect science. There's always something
right.
you can add. You talked about some of the comedians you liked, that you looked up to, Roseanne, etc. In Israel, one of my favorites is Benji Lovett, and he'll be performing at the comedy show. He's probably my favorite in Israel. I want to get your favorite in Israel, outside of me, of course, somebody else. Who is your favorite?
Ari, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. I'm pretty open to say lots of things, but I work with a lot of comedians who are really geniuses. Some of them are geniuses today. Some of them I think will be really a genius in another year or two. But I think that there's a vast group, a vast amount of difference in our style. So while there might not be a huge group, we all kind of come from slightly different angle and make for a very nice trellis of comedians.
Yeah, it's a good expression, Schultz. You would say that you think in Israel there's enough variety that there isn't like one superstar. There's a lot of stars. Is that fair to say?
I think that there are a few. No, I don't think I can say that either, because I think that there are a few. There are lots of sort of beginners and middle people, and some people with much more experience who are more towards the star quality.
Okay.
Again,
fair.
No names.
Yeah, very, very good. I tried. I'm a broadcaster, so I'm supposed to do.
And I love Benji too. I think Benji is really awesome. I've enjoyed watching him improve and over the years. He's amazing.
Yeah, I've known Benji about, I remember 7 years ago, Thanksgiving dinner, seeing him perform, and then we got to work together at different comedy shows, so it was great. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on Israel Sports News Radio. Benji, Hani, and myself will all be performing January 7th at the AACI to benefit One Family Fun, second annual Jerusalem Festivus Comedy Festival. Hani, thank you for the time today. We know you got to run, but looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Ari. This was lots of fun, and don't quote me if somebody heard this. Like I'm denying it all. I've got to go back to the laundry now.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thanks, Ari.
All right, be well. Speak to you soon. Take care.